The Unbreakable Record. Dr. Zafik Thornscale adjusted his crystalline monocle for the 1,000th time that morning, a nervous habit that had developed over his 3 centuries of perfecting the art of scientific destruction. His scaled fingers traced the edge of his data tablet, where a single number glowed with the pride of absolute achievement. 1,000. 10,000 different species tested. 10,000 different ways their weapons had performed exactly as designed. 0 failures. The Galactic Weapons Testing Consortium had built Station Omega-7 in the neutral zone between warring galaxies, where the laws of physics seemed just a little more flexible and the ethics committees had mysteriously smaller budgets. Here, in the sterile white laboratories that floated in the cosmic void, Dr. Thornscale had spent his career proving that their weapons worked on every conceivable form of life the universe had produced. From the gas-based ethereals of the nebula clusters to the silicon-based rocklings of the asteroid belts, every species had responded predictably to their carefully calibrated instruments of persuasion. The Zephyrians had crumbled under psychological pressure. The mighty Titan-born had surrendered when faced with weapons that exploited their methane-based biology. Even the notoriously stubborn Void Dwellers had submitted when confronted with devices that manipulated the fundamental forces they depended on for survival. Commander Vex Brightstar materialized beside him, her crystalline form catching the artificial light and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the laboratory walls. Her species communicated through harmonic resonances that most universal translators converted into something resembling wind chimes having a philosophical discussion, but Dr. Thornscale had learned to interpret the subtle musical variations that indicated her emotional state. Today, those harmonics carried notes of excitement mixed with what sounded like barely contained scientific curiosity. "The new test subjects have arrived," she announced, her voice creating small musical echoes that made the laboratory equipment hum in sympathetic response. Species designation: Homo sapiens. Origin: Planet Earth. Orion Arm, Sector 7. Dr. Thornscale consulted his species database, scrolling through thousands of entries until he found the relevant file. His reptilian features arranged themselves into what other species had learned to recognize as his expression of scientific interest, mixed with mild contempt for anything that wasn't immediately threatening. "Bipedal mammals," he read aloud, his forked tongue flickering with distaste. "Relatively primitive technology, short lifespan, no natural armor, claws, or defensive adaptations of note." He paused, reading further into the biological analysis that his advanced scouts had compiled. "Average temperature tolerance range seems unusually broad for a non-adapted species. Dietary flexibility rated as concerning by our xenobiologists. Social structure described as organized chaos with democratic tendencies and an inexplicable fondness for competitive sports." Commander Brightstar's harmonics shifted to what Dr. Thornscale had learned indicated amusement. The classification team noted some unusual characteristics. These humans appear to have evolved on a planet that their own species describes as actively trying to kill everything that lives on it. "Impossible," Dr. Thornscale scoffed, his tail creating sharp snapping sounds against the laboratory floor. "No species evolves higher intelligence in an environment of constant mortal peril. The stress would prevent proper neural development. It's basic evolutionary science." Through the reinforced observation windows of Testing Chamber 7, Dr. Thornscale observed the human subjects for the first time. 5 individuals sat around a metal table, engaged in some sort of ritual involving small rectangular cards and colored circular objects. Their behavior was remarkably calm for beings who had been informed they were about to undergo weapons testing that might result in various forms of discomfort, temporary incapacitation, or complete molecular dissolution. One human, a female with short brown hair and clothing that appeared to have been designed for maximum practicality rather than aesthetic appeal, looked directly at the observation window and waved enthusiastically. Her expression suggested genuine friendliness rather than the fear, resignation, or desperate bravado that characterized most test subjects at this stage of the process. "Hello there," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell from the colony ship New Hope. Thanks for the hospitality. The coffee in your waiting area was actually pretty decent, though you might want to consider adding some sweetener options. Also, your magazine selection could use some work. We've been reading the same issue of Galactic Weapons monthly for 3 hours." Dr. Thornscale's monocle nearly fell from his eye socket. In his 3 centuries of testing, no subject had ever initiated casual conversation with the researchers. Most species either cowered in terror, attempted to negotiate for their lives, or entered states of resigned meditation preparing for whatever fate awaited them. Fascinating, Commander Brightstar harmonized, her tones indicating scientific intrigue mixed with entertainment. Their stress hormone levels are remarkably low, heart rates steady, no signs of the typical pre-test anxiety we observe in other species. Perhaps they don't understand the situation, Dr. Thornscale muttered, activating the first test protocol. Let's begin with the standard neural discomfort array. Low setting will gradually increase intensity until we achieve the desired compliance response. The neural discomfort array was designed to stimulate pain receptors without causing actual physical damage. It was considered the most humane weapon in their arsenal, capable of inducing surrender through psychological pressure rather than physical harm. Most species submitted immediately upon experiencing even the lowest setting. The device hummed to life, casting an invisible field of carefully calibrated neural interference toward the humans. Dr. Thornscale watched his instruments register perfect function parameters as the field enveloped the test subjects. The humans paused their card game for exactly 2 seconds. Then one of them, a male with graying hair and arms that suggested years of physical labor, rubbed the back of his neck thoughtfully. "Did anyone else feel that weird tingly feeling?" he asked conversationally. "Kind of like when you sleep wrong and your arm goes numb, but more fuzzy?" "Yeah," replied another human, this one younger with bright blue hair that defied several known laws of biology and hair care science. "Reminded me of that time I touched the electric fence at my uncle's farm, except friendlier somehow." Captain Mitchell nodded sagely. "Could be atmospheric pressure changes. These space stations sometimes have environmental control issues. Remember that time on Kepler Station when the artificial gravity kept fluctuating and we all spent 3 days walking on the walls? At least this is just a little tingling." Dr. Thornscale's claws clicked against his control panel with increasing agitation. "Increase power to maximum setting," he instructed the testing array, his voice carrying notes of scientific frustration mixed with professional determination. The neural discomfort array drew more power, its harmonics rising to frequencies that made the laboratory walls vibrate and caused several pieces of sensitive equipment to temporarily relocate themselves to different dimensions for safety purposes. The field intensity reached levels that had previously convinced entire military fleets to surrender, rather than endure continued exposure. The humans continued their card game. "Much better," announced the blue-haired human with apparent satisfaction. "That weird tingling is gone. Now it just feels like a really good back massage. Do you think they have spa services on this station? This would be amazing for working out those knots you get from sleeping in ship bunks for months at a time." Commander Brightstar's harmonics had shifted to frequencies that Dr. Thornscale's translator was having difficulty processing but seemed to indicate either deep confusion or the crystalline equivalent of hysterical laughter. "Dr. Thornscale," she managed between musical phrases that sounded like wind chimes having an existential crisis. "Perhaps we should try a different approach." "The molecular destabilization field," Dr. Thornscale declared, his scientific pride now engaged in what could only be described as a personal battle with the laws of biology and common sense. "No organic being can maintain cellular cohesion under molecular destabilization. It's physically impossible." He activated the second testing protocol, a device that had successfully incapacitated every carbon-based life form they had ever encountered by temporarily disrupting the bonds that held their molecules together. The effect was described by survivors as profoundly unsettling, like feeling yourself come apart at the atomic level while remaining conscious throughout the process. The humans became slightly translucent for approximately 15 seconds as their molecular structure flickered between states of existence. "Whoa!" exclaimed the graying human with obvious delight, holding up his hand to examine his temporarily transparent fingers. "This is exactly like that holographic technology they use in the entertainment districts, except I can feel it working. Is this some kind of medical scanner? My doctor back on Earth would love this for checking on my old knee injury." The female captain leaned back in her chair with an expression of genuine curiosity, rather than the existential terror that molecular destabilization typically induced. "The sensation is quite interesting," she observed clinically. "Like being gently taken apart and put back together again. Very thorough. I feel like I should be paying someone for this kind of treatment. This is better than those expensive regeneration treatments they offer at the fancy medical centers." Dr. Thornscale felt his left eye begin to twitch, a nervous tic that had last appeared during his doctoral dissertation defense when the examination committee had asked him to explain why his weapons were necessary when diplomacy existed. That twitch had nearly cost him his degree, his career, and his sanity. "Commander Brightstar," he said slowly, his voice carrying the controlled calm of someone whose worldview was beginning to crack around the edges like ice under pressure. "What exactly does our biological database say about human environmental adaptation?" The commander's form shifted through several different crystal configurations as she accessed the relevant files, her harmonics taking on notes that suggested she was discovering information that challenged several fundamental assumptions about how evolution was supposed to work. "According to the survey data collected by our advanced scouts," she reported, her musical voice now carrying undertones that resembled a symphony orchestra tuning their instruments while questioning the nature of music itself, "humans evolved on a planet designated as Class 12 Extreme Hostile Environment." Dr. Thornscale's monocle fell to the floor with a crystalline crash that sounded like someone dropping a small chandelier during an earthquake. "Class 12? That's the classification we reserve for planets that are actively attempting to eliminate all life forms. Nothing evolves to intelligence level on a Class 12 world. The environmental stress prevents proper neural development. The survey report indicates that Earth experiences regular catastrophic weather events that other species would classify as planetary disasters," Commander Brightstar continued, her harmonics now resembling the sound of someone reading technical manuals while experiencing profound philosophical confusion. "Earthquakes that literally shake the ground apart. Storms that produce electrical discharges powerful enough to briefly illuminate entire continents. Temperature variations that range from levels that would freeze most species solid to heat that would cause immediate heat stroke in 90% of known life forms." Through the observation window, the humans had apparently grown bored with their card game and were now examining the testing chamber with the casual interest of tourists visiting a particularly well-funded museum exhibit. One of them had discovered the emergency communication panel and was reading the instructions aloud with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for finding unexpected money in old clothing. "Hey, look at this," called the blue-haired human, pointing at a device that was clearly labeled Emergency Evacuation Teleporter. "Use only in case of imminent death." "They have an emergency teleporter. That's so thoughtful. Most testing facilities just have fire exits. This is definitely 5-star accommodations." Dr. Thornscale activated the psychological terror inducer, a device that projected images and sensations designed to trigger the deepest, most primal fears of any sentient species. The machine accessed biological fear responses that had evolved over millions of years, exploiting survival instincts that were supposedly universal among intelligent life forms. The testing chamber filled with swirling visions of cosmic horror, endless darkness, the heat death of the universe, the sound of civilizations screaming as they were consumed by entropy, and images of every possible way a biological organism could cease to exist. The humans watched with expressions of polite interest. "Neat special effects," commented Captain Mitchell, nodding approvingly at a particularly dramatic representation of galactic apocalypse. "The graphics quality is incredible. This is like those immersive experience theaters they have in the entertainment districts, except the sound design is much better, very atmospheric." The graying human squinted at a vision of cosmic destruction that had caused 3 different military commanders to retire from active service and take up peaceful farming on quiet agricultural worlds. "Is that supposed to be a black hole eating a solar system? Because if so, the physics are surprisingly accurate. Most entertainment media gets the gravitational effects completely wrong." "I like the color palette," added the blue-haired human thoughtfully. "Very dramatic, lots of reds and purples. It's giving off serious cosmic horror vibes, but in a fun way, like Halloween decorations for space." Dr. Thornscale's claws were now creating small grooves in his metal control panel as he struggled to maintain scientific objectivity in the face of results that violated everything he understood about fear, survival instincts, and the basic psychological responses that had driven the evolution of intelligence throughout the galaxy. "Commander," he said through gritted teeth that were designed for tearing through metallic armor plating but were currently being used to suppress what felt like the beginning of a complete psychological breakdown. "Activate the reality displacement cannon." The reality displacement cannon was not technically a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a device that temporarily shifted targets into alternate dimensional phases where the laws of physics worked differently, and survival required constantly adapting to new rules of existence. Most beings who experienced reality displacement emerged from the process fundamentally changed, usually developing a deep appreciation for the stability of their normal universe and a reluctance to engage in activities that might result in further displacement. The humans vanished from normal spacetime for exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. When they rematerialized, they were laughing. "That was amazing," exclaimed the blue-haired human, practically bouncing with excitement that seemed to violate several laws of post-dimensional travel trauma recovery. It was like being inside a kaleidoscope designed by someone who really understood advanced mathematics and had access to colors that don't normally exist. "I saw sounds and heard textures. My thoughts tasted like music, and music looked like my thoughts. This is better than any virtual reality system ever invented." Captain Mitchell was consulting what appeared to be notes she had somehow taken while existing in an alternate dimensional phase where note-taking should have been impossible. The experience provided some fascinating insights into non-linear time perception and the relationship between consciousness and dimensional stability, she reported with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a new favorite hobby. "I think I understand quantum mechanics now. It's all about perspective and whether you're willing to admit that reality is much more flexible than most people realize." Dr. Thornscale stared at his instruments, which were displaying readings that made no sense according to any known scientific principles. The humans showed no signs of dimensional displacement trauma, reality dissociation syndrome, or existential confusion disorder. Their brain patterns indicated they had not only survived the experience intact, but had apparently enjoyed it and learned from it. His greatest pride, his most sophisticated weapons, his life's work in perfecting instruments of control and compliance, had become entertainment for a species that treated his carefully calibrated torments like amusement park attractions with educational value. The final test subject, a quiet human who had been observing everything with the patient attention of someone accustomed to watching complex situations develop before taking action, finally spoke up. "Doctor," said the human, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that suggested years of experience managing difficult situations, "I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding here about what you're trying to accomplish and what we're capable of handling. Would it be possible for us to examine your weapons designs? We might be able to suggest some improvements." Dr. Thornscale felt something crack inside his scientific worldview, like ice breaking on a frozen lake during the first warm day of spring. "Improvements?" he repeated, his voice carrying frequencies that made nearby equipment begin displaying error messages and suggesting he take a vacation. "Well," continued the human with the casual tone of someone offering to help with household repairs, "based on what we've experienced so far, it seems like your weapons are designed to be impressive rather than effective. That's fine if you're trying to intimidate people, but if you actually want to solve problems, you might want to consider a different approach entirely." The human gestured toward the testing equipment with the familiar confidence of someone who had spent years fixing things that other people had overcomplicated. "For instance, that reality displacement device? Fascinating technology, but if you're trying to encourage cooperation, it might work better if you used it to show people different perspectives on their problems rather than traumatizing them with alternate dimensions. Context matters more than power when you're trying to change minds." Through his 3 centuries of scientific research, Dr. Thornscale had never encountered a species that responded to weapons testing by offering technical consultation services. His carefully constructed understanding of universal behavior patterns, threat responses, and survival instincts was developing. Cracks that threatened to become fundamental structural failures. Commander Brightstar's harmonics had shifted to frequencies that suggested she was experiencing either scientific breakthrough or complete cognitive breakdown. "Dr. Thornscale," she harmonized carefully, her crystalline form flickering with what appeared to be excitement mixed with existential confusion. "What if they're right? What if we've been approaching this entire field of study from the wrong angle for the past millennium? The possibility that his life's work had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between power and effectiveness was both terrifying and oddly liberating. Like discovering that a mathematical equation he had been struggling with for years was actually much simpler than he had realized, but the simple solution challenged everything he thought he knew about mathematics. "Run the complete testing protocol," Dr. Thornscale decided, his scientific curiosity finally overriding his wounded professional pride. "Every weapon, Every device, every instrument of control and compliance we've developed. I want to see how they respond to everything. The next 6 hours transformed Dr. Thornscale's understanding of weapons effectiveness, species psychology, and the fundamental nature of power itself. The humans treated his gravitational compression field like a fun carnival ride. They used his temporal displacement device to catch up on sleep, somehow managing to rest while experiencing time at different rates. His atmospheric terror generator made them homesick, and they spent 20 minutes sharing stories about weather systems on their home planet that sounded significantly more dangerous than anything his weapons could produce. When the testing concluded, the humans were not only unharmed but appeared refreshed, entertained, and genuinely grateful for the experience. They had taken notes, asked technical questions, and offered suggestions for improvements with the enthusiasm of consultants who had found a particularly interesting project. Dr. Thornscale sat in his laboratory, surrounded by instruments that had just failed for the first time in his career, staring at test results that challenged 3 centuries of scientific certainty. His monocle lay forgotten on the floor, his data tablets displayed error messages that resembled existential poetry, and his carefully maintained composure had been replaced by something that felt suspiciously like wonder. "Commander Brightstar," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose entire worldview was restructuring itself in real time. "I think we need to completely reconsider our approach to weapons design, conflict resolution, and possibly the fundamental nature of power itself." "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her harmonics indicating curiosity mixed with the kind of excitement that usually preceded major scientific breakthroughs or spectacular professional disasters. Dr. Thornscale looked through the observation window at the humans, who were now apparently teaching his automated testing systems how to play their card game. The machines, designed for precision and efficiency, were making beeping sounds that suggested they were either malfunctioning or experiencing something resembling enjoyment. "I think," he said, watching a security robot that had been programmed for intimidation carefully arranging cards with its mechanical appendages, "we need to hire them." The impossible results. The emergency session of the Galactic Weapons Testing Consortium convened at 0300 station time, when most rational beings would be sleeping, dreaming, or engaging in whatever restorative activities their species required to maintain psychological stability. Admiral Krex Shadowfin had arrived via emergency transport from the Aquatic Command Center, bringing with him the kind of urgent concern that typically accompanied news of imminent galactic catastrophe or the discovery that someone had been embezzling funds from the military budget for recreational purposes. His aquatic form moved through the specially designed atmospheric environment suit with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to crisis management, but his normally calm demeanor showed signs of strain that suggested the situation had moved beyond standard crisis protocols into territory that required entirely new classifications of professional concern. "Dr. Thornscale," Admiral Shadowfin's voice carried the electronic modulation necessary for interspecies communication, but the underlying tone suggested someone trying to maintain military composure while privately questioning the fundamental nature of reality. "I've reviewed your preliminary report 17 times. My analysis team has checked your data for errors, equipment malfunctions, and possible reality manipulation. Everything checks out, which means either your equipment is functioning perfectly, or the universe has developed a sense of humor and decided to play an elaborate practical joke on the military establishment." Dr. Thornscale gestured toward the observation chamber where the humans had apparently convinced the station's AI to join their card game. The artificial intelligence, originally programmed for complex strategic analysis and weapons coordination, was now making computational sounds that resembled either advanced mathematical processing or mechanical laughter. Its holographic avatar had somehow acquired a hat that appeared to be made from folded paper and was displaying what could only be described as expressions of concentration mixed with enjoyment. "Admiral, I've been conducting weapons tests for 3 centuries, Dr. Thornscale began, his voice carrying the weight of scientific authority challenged by impossible results. "I've tested our systems on crystalline beings who communicate through harmonic resonance, energy-based life forms that exist as pure consciousness, mechanical species that process reality through quantum calculations, and biological entities so exotic that we had to invent new categories of existence just to classify them." He paused, watching through the observation window as Captain Mitchell demonstrated something she called the proper way to shuffle cards to a security robot that had been designed for combat operations and crowd control, but was now making beeping sounds that indicated fascination with human manual dexterity techniques. Every species has shown predictable responses to our weapons, Dr. Thornscale continued. Fear, pain, disorientation, compliance, or various combinations thereof. But these humans, he gestured helplessly at the testing chamber, they respond to our most sophisticated instruments of control like they're experiencing mildly interesting weather phenomena or entertainment systems with educational value. Admiral Shadowfin's environmental suit registered what his species used as emotional indicators, and the reading suggested he was experiencing the aquatic equivalent of watching his carefully organized worldview dissolve like salt in water. Have you attempted to understand why they respond this way? Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, Dr. Thornscale consulted his notes, which had grown from standard scientific documentation to what resembled a philosophical treatise on the nature of impossibility. Their engineer volunteered to explain their perspective. According to his analysis, our weapons are designed based on universal assumptions about survival instincts that apparently don't apply to humans. Commander Brightstar's form crystallized into a configuration that indicated she was about to share information that would either solve everything or make everything significantly more confusing. Her harmonics carried notes of discovery mixed with what sounded like the musical equivalent of someone reading technical manuals while experiencing cognitive breakthrough. I've been studying their biological and psychological profiles, she announced, her voice creating harmonic patterns that made the laboratory equipment hum in sympathetic response. Humans evolved on a planet where survival required constant adaptation to environmental challenges that would eliminate most species within a single generation. She activated the holographic display system, projecting images and data that had been compiled by their most advanced xenobiology teams. The information created three-dimensional representations of Earth's environmental conditions that made several observers move instinctively toward the exits. Their planet experiences regular geological events that literally reshape the surface geography, Commander Brightstar explained, her harmonics indicating scientific fascination mixed with species-appropriate horror. Earthquakes that crack continents, volcanic eruptions that can affect global climate patterns, storm systems that generate electrical discharges powerful enough to temporarily illuminate space. The holographic display showed time-lapse footage of Earth's weather patterns, recorded by long-range observation satellites. Admiral Shadowfin's environmental suit began making alarmed beeping sounds as it processed visual data of hurricanes that spanned continental areas, tornadoes that could relocate entire human settlements, and blizzards that buried geographic features under frozen precipitation. Their food chain, Commander Brightstar continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that suggested someone reading a particularly disturbing academic paper about theoretical impossibility, consists almost entirely of other organisms that have evolved specifically to avoid being consumed. Everything they eat has developed toxins, defensive mechanisms, or survival strategies designed to prevent predation. Dr. Thornscale examined the biological data with growing amazement and mounting concern for his own sanity. According to this analysis, humans regularly consume substances that would require emergency medical intervention for most galactic species. They've developed immunity to toxins that we classify as controlled substances. The most disturbing discovery? Admiral Shadowfin interjected, his voice carrying the kind of military precision that suggested he was dealing with information that challenged his understanding of strategic planning and threat assessment, is their social structure. They've organized their civilization around the principle of controlled competition. He activated a secondary display showing human social organization patterns that resembled mathematical chaos theory applied to community management with elements of organized insanity and democratic idealism. They voluntarily engage in activities they classify as sports, where the objective is to overcome artificial obstacles, defeat other humans in ritualized combat, or achieve arbitrary goals under time pressure, Admiral Shadowfin explained, his voice indicating someone trying to make sense of recreational activities that sounded like military training exercises disguised as entertainment. Through the observation window, Dr. Rodriguez had apparently finished explaining card games to the security robots and was now examining the molecular destabilization field generator with the focused attention of someone who spent their professional life making complicated machinery work properly. "Excuse me," Dr. Rodriguez called through the communication system, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone accustomed to explaining technical concepts to non-technical personnel. I think there might be a calibration issue with your molecular destabilization device. Dr. Thornscale activated the communication array with the reflexive response of someone whose scientific curiosity had overcome his professional embarrassment. What kind of calibration issue? Well, Dr. Rodriguez replied, apparently completely comfortable with offering technical advice to beings whose technology was supposedly centuries ahead of human development. Based on the sensations we experienced, your device is working perfectly for molecular displacement, but the harmonic frequencies are slightly off if you want to achieve actual disruption. The human engineer gestured toward the device with the casual confidence of someone who had spent years diagnosing problems with complex machinery. If you adjust the quantum resonance by about 12% and modify the field coherence patterns, you should get much better results. Also, the power consumption could be reduced by about 60% with some basic efficiency improvements. Right now, you're using way more energy than necessary to achieve your desired effects. Dr. Thornscale felt his scientific worldview shift from confusion to something approaching wonder. You can improve the efficiency of our weapons? Probably, Dr. Rodriguez replied with the modest confidence of someone who viewed complex engineering problems as interesting puzzles rather than insurmountable challenges. Most of your designs are based on solid theoretical principles, but the practical applications could use some optimization. It's like having a really powerful engine in a car that's designed to look impressive rather than actually get you where you want to go efficiently. Commander Brightstar's harmonics had shifted to frequencies that indicated either breakthrough scientific understanding or complete breakdown of her ability to process impossible information. Dr. Thornscale, what if the humans are approaching weapons design from a completely different philosophical foundation? Meaning? Most galactic civilizations design weapons to demonstrate power and intimidate opponents into submission, she explained, her musical voice creating patterns that sounded like someone working through complex theoretical problems in real time. But humans appear to design solutions to accomplish specific objectives with maximum efficiency and minimum waste. Admiral Shadowfin's environmental suit registered what his species used to indicate sudden understanding mixed with professional alarm. You're suggesting that humans don't see our weapons as weapons at all. They see them as inefficient tools that could be improved to better accomplish their intended purposes. Through the observation window, the humans had apparently grown tired of improving alien technology and had decided to demonstrate their own problem-solving methods. Captain Mitchell was explaining something she called collaborative brainstorming to a group of automated testing devices that were designed for independent operation and had never been programmed to work cooperatively. The fundamental difference, Dr. Rodriguez explained to his increasingly attentive audience of machines and observers, is that you're designing from the assumption that power equals effectiveness. But effectiveness actually comes from understanding exactly what you're trying to accomplish and then finding the most efficient way to accomplish it. He gestured toward the reality displacement cannon with the easy familiarity of someone who had spent his career working with machinery that was supposedly beyond his technological understanding. This device is incredibly sophisticated and represents centuries of advanced research and development. But if your goal is to encourage cooperation, you're using it wrong. How should we be using it? Dr. Thornscale found himself asking, his scientific curiosity overriding decades of professional pride and species-appropriate skepticism about accepting advice from supposedly primitive civilizations. Show people different perspectives on their problems, Dr. Rodriguez replied with the patient tone of someone explaining something that seemed obvious once it was properly explained. Instead of traumatizing them with alternate realities, use the device to help them understand how their conflicts look from different viewpoints. Let them experience situations from their opponent's perspectives. Most disagreements happen because people can't see past their own assumptions. The blue-haired human, who had introduced herself as engineer Maya Brightwater, was now sketching modifications to the neural discomfort array on a piece of paper she had somehow acquired. Her drawings looked like technical diagrams created by someone who understood both the theoretical principles and the practical applications of advanced neurological manipulation technology. Instead of causing discomfort, Maya explained, holding up her sketches for the automated systems to analyze, you could modify this device to enhance empathy and communication. Same basic technology, completely different application. People make better decisions when they can think clearly and understand each other. Dr. Thornscale watched his weapons being transformed into tools for cooperation and understanding with the fascination of someone witnessing the birth of an entirely new scientific discipline. His instruments of control were becoming devices for communication. His methods of intimidation were being converted into systems for education and mutual understanding. "Commander Brightstar," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose career was being revolutionized in real time. "I think we need to completely reconsider our approach to conflict resolution, weapons development, and possibly the fundamental purpose of advanced technology and galactic civilization." "What are you proposing?" she asked, her harmonics indicating the kind of excitement that typically preceded either major scientific breakthroughs or spectacular professional disasters. Dr. Thornscale looked at the humans, who were now apparently teaching the station's AI how to play something they called cooperative puzzle-solving games that involved working together to achieve common goals rather than competing to defeat opponents. "I think," he said, watching artificial intelligences designed for strategic analysis, learning the human concept of teamwork, "we need to stop testing weapons on them and start learning how they solve problems without weapons." The revolution. 6 months after the humans had accidentally revolutionized galactic warfare by refusing to be intimidated by it, Dr. Zephic Thornscale found himself in the most unusual position of his 3-century career. Instead of designing weapons to control other species, he was learning how to help species understand each other. His laboratory had been transformed from a sterile testing facility into something the humans called a collaborative workspace, complete with comfortable seating, natural lighting that didn't hurt anyone's optical sensors, and a coffee machine that had somehow achieved legendary status among the station's diverse population. The coffee machine had been a gift from Captain Mitchell, who had noticed that most galactic civilizations had never developed proper caffeine-based beverages and were missing out on what she described as one of humanity's greatest contributions to workplace productivity and general life satisfaction. The machine now served beverages perfectly calibrated for 17 different species' biological requirements, and had become an unofficial diplomatic meeting point where beings who had been suspicious of each other for millennia were discovering common ground over properly prepared stimulant drinks. Admiral Shadowfin materialized in the laboratory's new aquatic consultation chamber, his environmental suit gleaming with modifications that Dr. Rodriguez had suggested for improved mobility and comfort. The human engineer had spent 3 days explaining how mechanical systems could be designed for user comfort without sacrificing functionality, concepts that had apparently never occurred to military equipment designers who prioritized intimidation over practical usability. "Dr. Thornscale," Admiral Shadowfin announced, his voice carrying notes of amazement mixed with what sounded like military officer trying to file reports about situations that challenged the fundamental assumptions of strategic planning. "I have results from the field deployment of human-modified conflict resolution systems." The Admiral activated a holographic display that showed star maps indicating recent diplomatic activities across 17 different sectors. Instead of the traditional red indicators for active conflicts and orange warnings for potential hostilities, the map was dominated by blue symbols representing successful negotiations and green markers indicating ongoing collaborative projects. "The Zephyrian-Arcturian border dispute," Admiral Shadowfin reported, consulting data that appeared to make him question several basic assumptions about military effectiveness and interspecies relations, "was resolved in 47 minutes using Captain Mitchell's "let's just talk about this like adults" protocol. Dr. Thornscale examined the conflict resolution report with the fascination of someone discovering that complex mathematical equations could be solved using basic arithmetic and common sense. 47 minutes? That conflict had been ongoing for 87 years. Our military analysts predicted it would require at least 3 decades of careful diplomatic intervention followed by decades of peacekeeping operations. Apparently, Admiral Shadowfin continued, his voice indicating someone trying to explain results that challenged his understanding of how diplomacy was supposed to work. Captain Mitchell simply arranged for both sides to meet in a neutral location with good coffee, comfortable seating, and a rule that everyone had to listen to each other without interrupting. After about 20 minutes of actual conversation, they realized they were fighting over a trade route that could easily accommodate both civilizations if they just coordinated their shipping schedules. The holographic display shifted to show the former conflict zone, where Zephyrian and Arcturian vessels now traveled in organized convoys that had improved efficiency for both species while reducing travel times and fuel consumption. The border region had been redesigned as a collaborative trade hub that was generating economic benefits for everyone involved and had become a popular destination for interspecies cultural exchange programs. Commander Brightstar crystallized into the laboratory with harmonics that indicated excitement mixed with what sounded like someone trying to process information that challenged several fundamental laws of physics and political science. Dr. Thornscale, we've received communication from the Grimthak Warrior Coalition. They're requesting human assistance with what they describe as a strategic challenge that requires unconventional thinking. The Grimthak had been considered the most militaristic species in the galaxy, with a culture built around concepts of honor, combat, and the kind of aggressive territorial expansion that required constant military intervention from peacekeeping forces. Their society was organized around warrior traditions that dated back thousands of years and involved ritualized combat, complex hierarchies based on fighting ability, and social customs that made diplomatic negotiation nearly impossible. "What kind of strategic challenge?" Dr. Thornscale asked, his scientific curiosity now permanently engaged in the process of understanding how humans approach problems that other species considered unsolvable. According to their transmission, Commander Brightstar's harmonics indicated someone trying to translate concepts that didn't exist in most galactic languages. They've discovered that their traditional warrior culture is no longer sustainable because they've become so effective at combat that they've eliminated all external threats and are now facing the problem of maintaining social cohesion without enemies to fight. Dr. Thornscale felt his understanding of galactic politics shift into entirely new configurations. They've become victims of their own military success? Essentially, yes. Their warrior traditions require conflict to maintain cultural identity, but they've become so powerful that no one wants to fight them anymore. Their young warriors have no opportunities to prove themselves in combat. Their military leaders have nothing to command, and their entire social structure is collapsing because it was built around the assumption of permanent warfare. Through the observation window, Dr. Rodriguez was explaining something he called productive competition to a group of automated weapon systems that had been designed for efficiency and precision, but had never been programmed to understand concepts like sportsmanship, fair play, or the idea that competition could be enjoyable rather than destructive. Maya Brightwater had established what she called the Practical Solutions Workshop in the station's former weapons testing arena. The space had been reconfigured with modular seating, interactive displays, and demonstration areas where beings from different species could work together on collaborative projects without worrying about accidentally triggering interspecies incidents through cultural misunderstandings or communication failures. The humans have suggested something they call competitive cooperation, Commander Brightstar explained, her harmonics indicating someone trying to describe concepts that sounded contradictory, but apparently worked in practice. Instead of eliminating conflict entirely, they propose channeling competitive instincts toward constructive activities that benefit everyone involved. Dr. Thornscale accessed the human proposal files, reading documentation that combined advanced social psychology with what appeared to be practical experience managing complex group dynamics in high-stress environments. The proposals included detailed plans for converting military competitions into collaborative challenges, transforming warrior traditions into community service programs, and redirecting aggressive instincts toward projects that required courage, skill, and determination, but resulted in construction rather than destruction. "They want to teach the Grimthak how to compete constructively?" Dr. Thornscale asked, his voice carrying the kind of scientific fascination typically reserved for discovering new fundamental forces or witnessing the birth of stars. According to Dr. Rodriguez, Admiral Shadowfin consulted his communication records. Humans have extensive experience with channeling competitive instincts into activities that strengthen communities rather than destroying them. He mentioned something called sports leagues, where warriors compete against each other using skill and strategy, but everyone goes home alive afterward and often becomes friends through shared challenges. The concept challenged everything Dr. Thornscale understood about species psychology and social organization. Competition that strengthened communities instead of dividing them. Conflicts that created friendships rather than lasting enmities. Warriors who fought for the joy of testing their abilities rather than the necessity of eliminating threats. Maya Brightwater's voice carried through the communication system as she addressed a mixed group of alien observers who had come to study human problem-solving methods. "The key to productive competition," she explained with the patient enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed teaching, is making sure everyone understands that the goal isn't to defeat opponents, but to push each other to perform better than any of you could achieve alone. She gestured toward a demonstration area where beings from 6 different species were working together on what appeared to be an engineering challenge that required combining their different biological capabilities and technological knowledge. When you compete to help each other succeed, everyone wins. The challenge becomes finding ways to use your strengths to support other people's strengths instead of exploiting their weaknesses. Dr. Thornscale watched Grimthak warriors learning to apply their combat skills to construction projects that required precision, teamwork, and strategic thinking. Their natural aggressiveness was being channeled into determination to build better solutions faster than other teams. But the competition was structured so that every team's success contributed to a larger project that benefited everyone involved. The transformation was remarkable. Warriors who had spent their lives training for individual combat were discovering that coordinated teamwork required different kinds of courage and skill. Their competitive instincts remained intact, but were now focused on achieving collective goals rather than individual dominance. Dr. Thornscale, Captain Mitchell's voice carried through the laboratory's communication system, "Could we speak with you privately? We have a proposal that might interest you." The humans had requested a meeting in what they called the informal consultation space, which had previously been testing chamber 12 but was now equipped with comfortable seating, natural lighting, and what Maya had described as an atmosphere conducive to creative thinking and honest conversation. Dr. Thornscale found himself sitting across from 5 humans who had fundamentally changed his understanding of power, effectiveness, and the purpose of advanced technology. Their expressions carried the kind of serious thoughtfulness that suggested they were about to propose something significant. "Doctor," Captain Mitchell began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected large groups of people in challenging circumstances, "we've been observing how your weapons testing program operates, and we think there's an opportunity to help the entire galaxy solve problems more effectively." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with the enthusiasm of someone who had identified an interesting engineering challenge. "Your technology is incredibly advanced, but it's being used to solve the wrong problems. Instead of developing ways to force compliance, you could be creating tools that help different species understand each other and work together." Maya Brightwater activated a portable display device that showed what appeared to be architectural plans for converting weapons testing facilities into collaborative problem-solving centers. "We propose establishing the Galactic Institute for Creative Solutions," she announced, her voice carrying the excitement of someone presenting a project that could change everything for the better. "The concept is simple," Dr. Rodriguez explained, gesturing toward diagrams that showed how existing weapons technology could be modified for entirely different purposes. "Instead of testing how to control other species, we test how to help them communicate, collaborate, and solve problems together." The proposal included detailed plans for converting neural manipulation devices into empathy enhancement systems, transforming reality displacement technology into perspective-sharing tools, and redesigning fear-inducement weapons into motivation and inspiration generators that helped beings overcome challenges through increased confidence rather than submission to external pressure. "The economic benefits alone," Captain Mitchell continued, consulting calculations that had been verified by the station's AI systems, "would exceed current weapons sales by approximately 3,000%. Every species in the galaxy faces problems that could be solved through better communication and collaboration. But right now, they're spending resources on weapons instead of solutions." Dr. Thornscale felt his scientific worldview complete its transformation from confusion through understanding to something approaching enlightenment. The humans weren't just immune to weapons designed for control and intimidation. They had evolved beyond the need for such weapons entirely, developing social and technological systems based on cooperation, adaptation, and the revolutionary concept that problems existed to be solved rather than endured. "What would you need from the consortium to implement this proposal?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of scientific excitement that typically preceded either major breakthroughs or spectacular professional disasters. "Your technology, your facilities, and your expertise in understanding how different species think and communicate," Maya replied immediately, with the confidence of someone who had already worked out the practical details. "We'll provide the human perspective on creative problem-solving, alternative approaches to conflict resolution, and what Dr. Rodriguez calls applied common sense. Plus, added the quiet human who had been observing everything with patient attention. We'll share our coffee recipes. Proper caffeine preparation seems to be a universal requirement for productive thinking, but most galactic civilizations have been approaching it all wrong. Admiral Shadowfin's environmental suit registered what his species used to indicate decision-making under unprecedented circumstances. The Galactic Council has already expressed interest in funding this project. Apparently, peace is significantly more cost-effective than warfare, and the economic benefits of improved interspecies cooperation exceed military expenditures by factors that require new mathematical notation systems. 3 years later, Dr. Thornscale stood in the central hub of the Galactic Institute for Creative Solutions, watching beings from 847 different species working together on collaborative projects that would have been impossible under the previous system of competitive intimidation and mutual suspicion. The former weapons testing chambers had been converted into innovation laboratories where crystalline beings shared harmonic communication techniques with aquatic species, while mechanical entities learned organic problem-solving approaches from biological civilizations. The Neural Discomfort Array had become the Empathy Enhancement Network, helping species understand each other's perspectives and emotional contexts. The Reality Displacement Cannon was now called the Perspective Portal, used for showing negotiating parties how their conflicts appeared from different viewpoints and helping them discover solutions that worked for everyone involved. The Psychological Terror Inducer had been transformed into the Motivation and Inspiration Generator, helping beings overcome challenges through increased confidence rather than submission to fear. Maya Brightwater had established the Department of Applied Common Sense, where she taught courses in practical problem-solving to advanced civilizations that had somehow forgotten that most complicated problems had simple solutions if you approached them from the right angle with enough patience and willingness to admit when your first approach wasn't working. Dr. Rodriguez ran the Technical Innovation Lab, where he helped alien engineers improve their designs using human principles of efficiency, user-friendliness, and the radical concept that technology should make life easier rather than more complicated. His modification of galactic transportation systems alone had reduced travel times by 60%, while improving safety ratings and passenger comfort. Captain Mitchell directed the Diplomatic Solutions Center, where she taught interspecies negotiation using techniques that had been developed by humans who had learned to cooperate despite significant cultural, linguistic, and philosophical differences. Her success rate in resolving galactic conflicts had reached 98.7%, and the remaining 1.3% were situations where all parties involved were having so much fun arguing that they didn't want to stop. But perhaps the most successful innovation was the establishment of the Galactic Common Sense Distribution Network, managed by the quiet human who had finally introduced himself as Professor James Clearwater, a former teacher who specialized in helping people understand concepts that seemed obvious once they were properly explained. The network distributed what humans called common sense kits to civilizations across the galaxy. Each kit contained simple tools for problem solving, communication guidelines for discussing disagreements without escalating them into conflicts, decision-making frameworks for choosing between multiple options without requiring committee meetings that lasted longer than most planetary orbital periods, and basic emotional regulation techniques for managing frustration, anger, and the kind of pride that prevented people from admitting when they were wrong. Dr. Thornscale's personal transformation had been as dramatic as the institutional changes around him. His scientific expertise in weapons development had evolved into specialization in collaborative technology design. His understanding of species psychology had expanded from methods of control to techniques for communication and mutual support. His greatest professional achievement was no longer the creation of weapons that could force compliance from any species, but the development of systems that help different forms of life understand each other well enough to choose cooperation voluntarily. The morning reports that Grundle delivered to his desk no longer contained statistics about weapons effectiveness or casualty projections. Instead, they included updates on successful collaborations, breakthrough discoveries made by mixed species research teams, and requests for consultation from civilizations that had decided to solve their problems through creativity rather than force. "Sir," Grundle announced, his 3 eyeballs focusing on a datapad that displayed information in colors that hadn't existed before humans had taught galactic scientists about the relationship between electromagnetic spectrum manipulation and improved data visualization. "We've received a communication from the Galactic Council." Good news or unprecedented news? Dr. Thornscale asked, having learned that human communication patterns included questions that acknowledged the possibility of outcomes that weren't covered by traditional categories. Both, sir. The Council has declared the Human-Alien Collaborative Solutions Institute the most successful diplomatic initiative in recorded galactic history. Interspecies conflicts are down 94%. Economic cooperation has increased by factors that require new mathematical notation systems. And customer satisfaction ratings for galactic civilization as a whole have reached levels that our polling systems weren't designed to measure. Grundle paused, his eyeballs rotating independently as they processed additional information that appeared to challenge his understanding of basic governmental operations. Also, sir, the humans have been invited to address the full Galactic Assembly about establishing permanent collaborative problem-solving programs throughout all member civilizations. Dr. Thornscale looked through his laboratory windows at the bustling activity centers where beings who had been strangers, enemies, or simply indifferent to each other 6 months ago were now working together on projects that benefited everyone involved. Crystalline engineers were teaching harmonic construction techniques to mechanical species, while aquatic biologists collaborated with gas-based entities on atmospheric optimization systems. In the central courtyard, Professor Clearwater was conducting what he called basic life skills for advanced civilizations, teaching courses in effective use, communication, practical decision-making, and emotional intelligence to beings whose technological capabilities far exceeded human achievements, but who had somehow never learned how to have productive conversations or admit when they needed help. The transformation had been so complete that visitors from newly contacted civilizations often assumed that peaceful cooperation and collaborative problem-solving were standard practices throughout the galaxy, rather than innovations that had been introduced by a species most observers had initially classified as primitive and technologically backward. Captain Mitchell appeared in the laboratory doorway, carrying what had become her signature accessory, a datapad containing requests for human consultation services from civilizations across the galaxy. Her expression carried the satisfied exhaustion of someone who had spent months solving problems that other people had considered impossible. Dr. Thornscale, she announced with the cheerful efficiency that had become characteristic of human communication styles, we've received a rather interesting request from the Andromedans. Apparently, they've heard about our success with converting military technology into collaborative tools, and they want to discuss applying similar principles to their entertainment industry. Their entertainment industry. Seems they've been designing recreational activities based on the same principles they use for warfare, Captain Mitchell explained, consulting her notes with the patient attention of someone accustomed to explaining complex situations in simple terms. Competitive elimination, individual dominance, zero-sum outcomes where someone has to lose for anyone to win. They're wondering if entertainment could be more fun if everyone involved actually enjoyed the experience. Dr. Thornscale considered the implications of applying human collaborative principles to galactic entertainment. If humans could transform weapons of war into tools for peace, what could they do with technologies designed for recreation and cultural expression? Maya has already sketched out some preliminary ideas, Captain Mitchell continued, activating her datapad to display concepts that combined advanced alien technology with human understanding of what made activities genuinely enjoyable. Interactive experiences where participants work together to create shared stories, competitive games where the challenge comes from solving problems rather than defeating opponents, and entertainment systems that help people learn new skills while having fun. The proposals included designs for collaborative virtual reality systems where multiple species could share imagination-based experiences, competitive learning platforms where beings challenged each other to master new concepts and abilities, and interactive storytelling technologies that allowed entire communities to participate in creating cultural narratives that reflected their shared values and common goals. Dr. Rodriguez joined the discussion with the quiet enthusiasm of someone who had discovered that his engineering skills were applicable to far more situations than he had originally realized. The interesting thing about human entertainment, he explained, settling into a chair that had been designed by crystalline artisans using principles of ergonomic support that worked for multiple species simultaneously, is that our best recreational activities are really just practice for solving real problems. Games teach strategic thinking. Sports develop physical coordination and teamwork, Creative activities like music and art help people express emotions and communicate ideas that are difficult to explain with words alone, he continued, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone who enjoyed explaining technical concepts to interested audiences. Entertainment that only serves entertainment purposes gets boring quickly, but when recreation helps people develop useful abilities, it stays interesting indefinitely. The conversation was interrupted by harmonics from Commander Brightstar that indicated incoming communication of significant importance. The holographic communication array activated, displaying the image of beings from civilizations across the galaxy who had come together to address what appeared to be a matter of universal significance. Dr. Thornscale, announced a Zephyrian representative whose crystalline form indicated formal diplomatic status. The Galactic Assembly has reached a unanimous decision regarding the future of interspecies relations and conflict resolution protocols. The holographic display expanded to show representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of harmonic frequencies, electromagnetic pulses, and biochemical signals that the translation systems converted into a unified message of unprecedented cooperation. Based on the unprecedented success of human-guided collaborative problem-solving initiatives, the representative continued, the Assembly has voted to establish the Universal Institute for Creative Solutions, with permanent facilities in every sector and mandatory consultation protocols for any civilization considering military solutions to diplomatic challenges. Dr. Thornscale felt a sensation he hadn't experienced since his early days as a research student. The profound satisfaction of discovering that the universe was far more interesting and full of possibilities than he had previously imagined. Furthermore, the representative announced, the Assembly wishes to formally recognize humanity as the first species to achieve what we are now calling collaborative intelligence. The ability to solve problems by helping others solve problems, creating solutions that benefit everyone involved rather than achieving goals at others' expense. The humans exchanged glances that carried the kind of quiet satisfaction typical of people who had worked hard to achieve something meaningful, and were pleased to see their efforts recognized, but weren't particularly surprised by their success because they had been confident in their approach from the beginning. "Thank you," Captain Mitchell replied with the gracious simplicity that had become characteristic of human diplomatic communication. "We're honored to help, and we're looking forward to learning from everyone else too. After all, the best solutions usually come from combining different perspectives and approaches." Dr. Thornscale realized that his career in weapons development had become something entirely unexpected, a collaboration in creating tools for understanding, cooperation, and mutual support. His expertise in species psychology was now applied to helping different forms of life communicate effectively. His knowledge of advanced technology was being used to develop systems that enhanced empathy, creativity, and collaborative thinking. The universe was still dangerous, still full of challenges that required careful thought and sophisticated solutions. But now, instead of responding to challenges with weapons designed to eliminate opposition, galactic civilization was learning to respond with tools designed to transform opposition into cooperation, conflicts into collaborations, and enemies into partners working toward common goals. And somehow, the humans had convinced the entire galaxy that this approach was not only more effective than traditional warfare, but also more fun, more profitable, and significantly more likely to result in outcomes that everyone involved could feel good about. The most powerful weapons in the galaxy, it turned out, were curiosity, creativity, and the simple revolutionary idea that most problems could be solved if people were willing to listen to each other and work together toward solutions that helped everyone involved.